I think Wired magazine editor Nick Thompson summed up this week best. He wrote this. He said, America is where the high schoolers act like leaders and the leaders act like they're in high school. Unfortunately, two stories have merged this weekend. The pain that we all feel after the latest mass shooting, and then the confusion we all feel about the Russia probes. These stories have come together. While these grieving students in Parkland, Florida, are asking politicians to protect them and announcing a march on Washington, the President of the United States is making it about himself. President Trump tweeting overnight, "It's very sad that the FBI missed all of the many signals sent out by the Florida school shooter. This is not acceptable." He's right about that. But then he continued by saying they at the FBI, are spending too much time trying to prove Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. There is no collusion. It's clear the president is feeling the heat of Robert Mueller's special counsel, and he's lashing out, implying that the FBI might have failed to stop the shooting because it's too obsessed with Russia. Let's be clear. The president is insulting your intelligence. Let's pull up FBI.gov. It says right there, the FBI employs 35,000 people. There are a small number of FBI agents working on the Mueller probe, but they have nothing to do with the investigation of tips like the one that was missed before the Parkland shooting.
At least we know what our federal agents have been doing recently, why they were too busy to stop school shootings. They've been chasing down bad Facebook trolls.
This is the FBI that spends all their time, all their manpower, and all their resources going after a failed Russian conspiracy that never existed. And they should be going after bad guys.
How many agents have been taken off the duty of investigating terror and domestic terror to follow these political dead ends?
Aha. So that's where President Trump got the idea. Yes, this has been a talking point from pro-Trump media ever since Friday, that there's a link between the FBI's failure and the ongoing Russia probes. Again, this is nonsensical. But I want you to see what's going on behind the scenes. Geraldo said that on TV on Saturday morning. And then on Saturday evening, what did Geraldo do? He was at Mar-a-Lago. He had dinner with President Trump. That's according to new reporting from the Washington Post. Now, when did Trump tweet that nonsensical claim? 11 p.m. Saturday. You tell me if you think there's a connection there. But the tweets have continued all weekend long. Here are just some of the tweets from the president. You look at what he's doing here. He's undercutting his own national security advisor. He is ranting and raving about the fake media. He's got tweets riddled with misspellings and profanity. I don't know, maybe down at Mar-a-Lago, maybe in person, President Trump is cool, calm, and collected. But on Twitter, he sounds deeply troubled. He sounds unhinged. This is why questions about his fitness for office are so urgent. This is the biggest story that I see happening right now. So joining me to talk about this and other issues, David Gergen, CNN senior political analyst. He was an advisor to Presidents Nixon, Ford, Reagan, and Clinton. And Dan Pfeiffer, CNN political commentator and former senior advisor to President Obama. Both of you have at one time or another been communications directors for presidents. You've both been inside the White House. So I want to try to assess what we learned from this presidential tweet storm. David Gergen, first to you. Is this unhinged?
It reminds me very much of the last days of President Nixon when he became deeply, deeply insecure, lashed out in all sorts of ways, and didn't remain focused on the job at hand. And this, I'm afraid, has been the President Trump's pattern now for some time. I don't know why he's so insecure. It certainly suggests, as Mueller closes in more, that there is something he very much does not want us to know, and he's very afraid that Mueller is going to get there. But I also think, Brian, and Dan can speak to this well, the way a White House runs, people in the staff take their cues from the top, from the president. And if he is deceptive, if he is dishonest with the public, then what you find in the White House is a culture of deceit and deception. And they can't get their story straight because there hasn't been a history of trying to be straight.
Is that what you see today?
That's what I see today, yes. I think that we have an extraordinary situation where that tweet you just from Mr. Thompson, I thought, put it just right. You know, we're under assault in all sorts of ways, as we've seen in this past week, and the press has been chronicling. And that is, our nation is obviously now under assault from the Russians on our elections, not just the 2016, but as we head into 2018. Our children are under assault in their schools. Dreamers are under assault from law enforcement officers. And there's no moral leadership from Washington, from the Congress or the White House, frankly. And where is the moral leadership coming from? I'm here in Broward County as we speak, just a few blocks away from where 1,000 people gathered. And the moral leadership came from those young 18-year-olds, like Emma Gonzalez, wonderful, compelling speech.
Absolutely. So, Dan, I guess I'm left wondering, why hasn't someone taken away the president's cell phone? Why are these tweets still coming out? Why isn't there a support structure at the White House to save him from himself?
Well, for two reasons. One, Trump doesn't want it and he won't allow it. Even if you take General Kelly, someone who had a lifetime of experience in the military, he said his job is not to read the president's tweets. He doesn't pay attention to Twitter, which is sort of like a chief of staff saying, I don't care what the president says, because this is President Trump's form of communication. And the people there is a selection bias in the people who have ended up working in this White House. The top tier of best known, best experienced Republican operatives, people who work for George W. Bush or Mitt Romney or others, have chosen not to be in this White House because they don't trust Donald Trump. So the people who are there are people who have come basically directly from the Fox News set and are sort of people who are willing to risk career suicide, risk legal jeopardy for the glory, I guess, or infamy of serving Trump. And so the president is inexperienced and incapable of the job he's doing. The people he surrounded himself are inexperienced and incapable of the job they've been assigned to do.
In the press office, one of the deputy press secretaries, Hogan Gidley, has been on a Fox News interview tour recently. This is from one of his interviews where he essentially said, it's the media's fault. You all are worse than a hostile foreign government.
There are two groups that have created chaos more than the Russians, and that's the Democrats and the mainstream media.
No surprise, Russia Today ate that up. We can put on screen the tweet from Russia Today. This is the Kremlin-controlled media outlet that was promoting what Gidley said. Dan, your reaction?
Well, look, this is the incentive structure for Trump staff. I'm sure Hogan Gidley, who is a mid-level staffer there, got a high five from the president for saying that. And whether they are unwitting or witting, they are being tools of the Russian propaganda machine. I think what they're essentially doing is they have an audience of one in Trump and future career prospects at Fox News, and that is what is driving this. And it all goes back to the president, because this is what he wants from his staff. These are the kind of staff he wants, and they are doing what he wants them to do.
To that point, I thought the most interesting quote that I read all week long was in a Michael Lewis piece in Vanity Fair. It was in Vanity Fair. It was an interview with Steve Bannon, and let's put on screen what Bannon said. There's a profanity here we had to excerpt out, but he says, the Democrats don't matter. The real opposition is the media. And the way to deal with them is to flood the zone with you know what. David Gergen, is that what you see happening? That there's all the tweets, all the messages, all the confusing counter narratives. It's just an attempt to flood the zone like that?
Absolutely. I think, and to flood the zone in a way that discredits other institutions that may become critical to him, starting with Bob Mueller.
Like the FBI or the media or Mueller.
It's just discrediting discrediting Mueller, discrediting what may come out through the Justice Department from Mueller, discrediting the press that will be reporting on what Mueller does, so that a third of the country will believe that it's all overblown or it's been made up or whatever it may be. I think there's been a very clear pattern right from the beginning that has actually in some ways worked, but because it's kept that base together, but it's eroding the trust in the presidency, the trust in this president around the rest of the country, and it's been extremely damaging, I think, for our sort of sense of being a single people, that we have some sense of unity about our country. And the Russians are laughing at us because they're getting away with this. They're fomenting a lot of this, and there's no sense of urgency, especially in looking ahead. We have an election that's just around the corner later this year. What if the Democrats, take the House back? Is that all going to be blamed on fake news? What if they fall short? Are Democrats going to think, it was all that meddling, and they've taken those, they won a few seats that they wouldn't have otherwise won? This is what split the country apart, and it is the beginnings. In many other countries, it's been the beginnings of an authoritarian rule, and that's the larger threat hanging over us now.
That's a pretty frightening picture you just painted. Are you personally afraid of that, David?
I find the threat is growing. There's this new book out about how democracies die, written by 2 Harvard professors, and it's quite striking, Brian, about the number of countries that were led by democratically elected leaders, but they turn more and more authoritarian. A dozen countries have flipped from democracy to authoritarianism since the end of the Cold War. We're not immune to that. I think we have strong checks and balances. Thank God we have long traditions and norms, but we have to protect those norms and in a bipartisan way. We must come together. Those of us who care about the way the country has been run historically and the way it's been successful historically must rally to the kind of standards and the respect for rule of law, the respect for a free press that has made this country great.
And Dan, last word to you. You certainly have a point of view on your podcast, Pod Save America, coming from the Obama White House. You're a vocal critic of Trump. But what do you want to see journalists doing in the environment that David just described?
Well, I think they need to keep doing what they've been doing and aggressively hold Trump and his administration account. I actually think the problem here is not a failure of journalism. It is 2 things. One, this is not just Trump. This is the entire Republican Party has decided they are okay with Trump's behavior, the rampant corruption within the administration, and doing essentially nothing about an attack on our democracy. And it's not the mainstream media, as we call it, CNN, New York Times, ABC, whoever else, are out there doing their job reporting. The problem is that there's a propaganda infrastructure led by Fox News that is a willing participant in covering up crimes and misleading the American people about a very dangerous situation. I agree with David. Our democracy is under assault, and that assault is coming from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And we think our democracy can survive anything, but these things happen slowly and then suddenly. And I think we're in a very dangerous place here, but we need both parties to step up here and do the right thing. And right now, the Republicans have decided not to do that.